There we go.
All right, welcome back, guys. We are doing The Body Keeps Score. Scott and I, we actually both just had COVID, one more recently than the other, but we are praying for you guys. We just want to say that from the beginning, for those that are exposed or who has COVID. It's definitely a time where things are spreading fast, so be safe out there. But we are still in Part 5 of The Body Keeps Score. Part 5 is Paths of Recovery. This is still when Dr. Van der Kolk is going through different modalities of healing that he uses to help people recover from trauma, from a crisis. So we're going into chapter 18 and 19. We are so close to being done. Chapter 18 is filling in the holes, creating structures. Now, what is the structures that he is talking about, Scott?
Yeah, this was very new to me, and I just think it's fascinating. I can't say I have a lot of experience with this directly, but as I understand it, and from his many examples, the structures are either people or even things, in some cases, that we put in place in a guided scenario, and then we have a conversation with them. So, for example, Dr. Van der Kolk talks about when he did this for the first time himself. I'm not sure if it was a psychologist, therapist, but the person he was working with had him say, choose, there's no other people in the room, just the two of them. Choose something in this room to represent your father. And he got some, whatever, they took a desk,
clock, or
said.
Big clock, I think.
Yeah, and set it up on, it was huge. And then something to represent your mom, and it was
a lamp.
Yep. And then something to represent your wife, your kids, little pillows, and
so what we're talking about is a structure in your mind of where people literally are at inside, right?
That's right. So you're allowing
the size of their presence. Sorry.
Yeah. No, that's okay. So then effectively you would go on to have conversations with either the structures or another human being that's representing mom, dad, child, whomever it would be.
And what are the reasons why you're addressing either the objects or the people that are standing in for father, brother, or whichever?
Because, well, first of all, those people may not be alive anymore, or you may not feel safe. They may not be accessible, or you may not feel safe in saying what you're about to say to them if they were, in fact, in the room.
And what is,
the greatest summary I took away from this is these structures allow you to go back into the movie of your life and effectively imagine rewriting that movie. And one might say, well, what's the value of that? You can't change the past. But what he argues is these structures gives you another way to view the situation, especially as it relates to the future.
Right. So what we're saying is, because trauma, what we've said in the past in terms of the chapters, trauma can make you stuck inside a former memory, some kind of crisis or abuse. And what the point is to overcome being stuck by offering a different possibility that could have happened, or at least a why or an explanation, or at least a way for you to imagine you were a part of your own healing process from that.
That's right. And with a guide or a counselor, somebody's trained in this, the idea is that I think this is where he uses this phrase. The 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 guide would say something as they watch you talk to the structure, or somebody volunteering as your father, let's say.
Yeah.
The counselor would say to you, the witness notices that you are feeling anxious right now in the presence of your father. Now, of course, it's not your actual father. It's somebody imitating your father who's agreed to play the role of your father. But the counselor might say, the witness notices this or the witness notices that. And it's helping you understand that even when you pretend that, let's say, Nathan has volunteered to be my father.
Yeah.
Even when I'm pretending Nathan's my father, I'm still going to feel similarly in the same way I would as if he were actually my father. And so people can observe how you're feeling.
And that is to fully immerse yourself in a past experience of your narrative and basically relive it so there can be a different outcome that helps you move past where you were stuck.
That's right.
Yeah.
And even gain the perspective of, that is what happened. I can't change that.
Acknowledging
However, it could have been, this was one of my takeaways. It could have been different. Like, that person could have responded differently to me, or even I could have responded differently to them. Again, you're not changing that, but you're aware enough, and it frees that stuckness that you mentioned.
Yeah.
So that in a future relationship, you now have another option. You have a viable, healthy, competing option, so you're not stuck in that traumatic experience.
Here is actually a great quote I highlighted. I'm going to read this off. It captures it. Trauma causes people to remain stuck in interpreting the present in light of an unchanging past. The scene you recreate in a structure may or may not be precisely what happened, but it represents the structure of your inner world, your internal map, and the hidden rules that you have been living by. And that's what we want to change, right? We want to change our internal map. And he said that in the past. That's basically being able to map out where we're at so that we can move toward a future that we want as well, rather than hidden rules dictated from a memory when we were 8 or 10 or 20 years old. And that is keeping us from being in charge of that internal map.
Yes. And it gives us what he calls a sense of agency. Again, moving forward.
Right. Yeah.
Now I realize that when I talk to anybody, I'm not stuck. I actually do have options.
Yeah.
I can't change what other people say to me or how they relate, but I'm an agent. I can choose to do things this way or that way.
You have permission, basically, as well. Like a hidden rule from a trauma might be, I can never trust a man again, right? Even if you want to trust in the future, a working business partner or something, there is a hidden rule that says, I'll never trust someone again, that could be affecting the way that you are treating your relationship with a coworker or whoever else. So that's hidden rules that we're talking about. They can basically be detrimental to our own agency, right?
And I think the word hidden is an excellent one, because not only do you have permission, but you may not have realized that you were acting out of this rule. So now you have permission, but you also have an awareness. I didn't realize I was relating to people out of this fear or out of this shame.
Yeah. Right. And that's hidden too. Often shame and our own self, what do you call it? Just self-destruction, whether it is an obvious addiction or a not quite as obvious habit, maybe in the way we speak or treat others. So that's what the structures are trying to do, is to open your eyes to those things so you can in fact imagine a different future for yourself too.
That's right. I said I don't have a lot of familiarity with this, though. As I think about it, I have done this in counseling, and it's
Yeah.
role play.
Right.
I've had couples turn to each other and recreate an argument, but this time have it flow in a healthier way. So I think
Right.
there's perhaps a parallel there to what this is, these structures.
Yeah, you're practicing a different possibility. You're practicing a different way of doing things. You know, I'm also thinking of a time when I was doing prayer ministry, and they call this theophostic. Theophostic training is kind of like building a structure, I think it was more mental, like in your imagination, than the way they do it, which is very physical. The only difference is they just have people add Jesus to the picture.
Mm-hmm.
So where is Jesus standing here? What is he saying? What does he want to do or show you? It's really just adding the component that God never left you during a difficult experience. In fact, he was there. How does he feel about it? And we just never quite think through what that might have been like too. And it has a powerful way of changing our perspective as well. So
yes. And I just want to add that as we try and relate these books to recovery,
yeah,
if we are addicted or we're stuck, part of the healing puzzle may be for us to say, why am I stuck? Is it because of something I believe about myself, a lie I believe about myself, that keeps driving me back to self-medicate? And perhaps it's probably more than perhaps, likely due to how I view myself from a past relationship.
Right.
Parents, loved one, whomever, spouse.
Right.
So going back and understanding why we view ourselves the way we do can help us understand why we turn to self-medication.
Okay. Speaking of why we're doing why we are doing the things we're doing, I do want to move to chapter 19 because we're getting to both of these. And this is also very interesting. I'd never heard of this, but this is called Applied Neuroscience, Rewiring the Fear-Driven Mind with Brain-Computer Interface Technology. Now that sounds like a big science experiment, which I'm kind of basically is a big medical science experiment. Yeah. But what are we talking about here?
So I was actually kind of introduced to this, or basically introduced to what's commonly called biofeedback. And I think neurofeedback falls under the umbrella of biofeedback. But I had a psychology class my first year in college, and I chose to do this biofeedback where I hooked up, I believe it was just a pulse meter. And I had to sit at a screen and look at my pulse. Now, neurofeedback is looking at your EEGs.
Yeah, your brain waves.
Your brain waves. Biofeedback will be looking at maybe your heart rate, your blood pressure. But basically, my assignment was to see if I could, of my own volition, bring down my heart rate.
Oh. It was like a Fitbit.
It was like a Fitbit, right? It was fascinating. So neurofeedback then is trying to increase our healthy brain waves, one of which is, there's 5. I've done some reading on this outside of our book.
Yeah.
I believe there's 5: gamma, beta, alpha, theta, and delta. But increasing our healthy alpha waves is one of the positive results of doing neurofeedback. And he gives the example when he first was trained in this or experienced this, he had an EEG meter, EEG, I can't remember what, hooked up to his brain. And so they were measuring and he had 3 rocket ships. So the EEG reader was hooked up to the computer. And
Yeah.
his goal, just by looking at the screen, reading his EEGs, was to make his rocket ship go faster. But it would,
Yeah.
and he said he leaned in and tried real hard, and he said his rocket ship went slower. And
Yeah, I remember that part. He was
his teacher
working
said,
too
okay,
hard at
now
it, and he was losing.
sit back, relax. Here's the common theme through so much of what we've read and talked about on these videos. Relax, take a deep breath, slow yourself down, and all of a sudden, his EEG alpha healthy brain waves started to increase, which amazingly, the software, when that happens,
Yeah.
gives a positive feedback.
Mm-hmm.
And so you actually learn what it feels like when your brain is in a healthier state. Pretty fascinating.
Getting in tune with your brain waves is quite fascinating to me. There was one story, an example they were giving where there were some musicians that were hooked up to it, and they did, I think, 20 sessions or something, and they were doing, and it helped them so much that they did like 10% better than their classmates, because they were professional musicians, because of how it helped them have what he calls executive function, focus and executive function, meaning your brain is highly tuned in, highly focused, but still relaxed enough so that it's a healthy activity. I just thought that was fascinating. So I
That's
thought
right.
I should try that one day so I can get better.
Yep. And again, as it relates to recovery, he does discuss in this section how drugs and alcohol provide temporary relief from traumatic symptoms. But of course, you always have to withdraw, and withdrawal from drugs and alcohol or other addictions can cause hyperarousal, nightmares, flashbacks, irritability.
Yeah.
And he mentions again that EMDR certainly can help with this. And he says strongly, he seems very excited about neurofeedback.
He does.
He says it can really help with addiction. So
yeah, I mean, it was pretty shocking, because just something like this that is, I think it's 20 to 40 sessions, and he said after these, some people never had to go back to their drug addiction again. And it kind of seems like a silver bullet thing, but also I can understand why, because changing your brain waves does mean that you're trying to realign the way your brain is supposed to work. I mean, somewhere in here it says, it's supposed to help with the proper wiring of your sensory integration systems. That's just one line. I know that sounds complicated, but it does mean that rewiring the brain would help those with addictions. I mean, a lot of times people who are in addictions, they know they're at kind of the mercy of their brain firing, and they can't do anything about it. They have to just follow through with what their brain is saying. And so it does seem like a really positive thing in the future that he said, more research to come, more trials and things to test it out, but really fascinating.
I found a quote from, I think it's Dr. Norman. He spells his last name Doidge, but the book, he's the best-selling author of this book called The Brain That Changes Itself, and then another one, The Brain's Way of Healing. So I've not read either of these books, but I thought the quote was interesting as it relates to the body keeps the score. It says that this author who popularized the idea of brain plasticity or neuroplasticity, which we talk about at Celebrate Recovery, is telling psychologists, doctors, and psychiatrists that neurofeedback is the unsung hero of neuroplasticity. And now he sends all his patients to neurofeedback first before they do anything else. I was like, wow, that's pretty amazing.
Wow, that's quite a statement to say. Just might as well do it first. Although I can understand why, because, you know, for some people they can't communicate about their past. For some people they just feel stuck. For some people their brain waves are so slow, because I know that there are certain brain waves that are you're more likely to be in depression, ADD, other things that are limiting you, and obviously getting kind of a reset for the way your brain works does kind of seem like a good step to take when it
Yep.
comes to
And
yeah.
I want to say too to our friends who are listening, who you might think, okay, but what does this have to do with Christ, or what does this have to? And I totally get that. It is interesting to think about how much time we read Christ spent in prayer, for example.
Mhm.
And usually when we pray, I mean, next time you pray in a group or with somebody else, I will often hear people, how do they start off prayer? Kind of like this.
Yeah.
Lord, thank you. They take a deep breath, they slow
Right.
down, and they focus in on it. Specifically, we focus in on the God of the universe.
Yeah.
And and one way to view this, if it's helpful, is when we pray, when we when we do deep breathing, our brain is responding. That we know. Our brain looks different when we eat than it does when we are
Right.
taking a final exam, or
Right.
when we're talking to a loved one. We know
Right.
our brain looks different. And one way that this book is challenging me, I mean, they're not challenging me to think this way, but I'm relating it this way as a follower of Christ. I know that when I pray, my brain lights up like a Christmas tree in a different way than it does when I'm doing something else.
Right.
And so God has made me in this way. And
Yeah.
while I am fascinated by the neurofeedback, I'd love to be able to do the rocket ship experiment here on my screen. The big takeaway for me is when I do some of these things that Jesus taught me to do, like pray or slow down,
Hmm.
or be with friends, I know my brain, I don't have to, in a sense, I don't have to worry about how my brain's going to respond. God's built me that way. But this is just a way to look at it that shows, wow, God's way is the best way.
Yeah.
And when we follow that way, our brain will naturally move to a healthier place.
Yeah. Right.
Anyway.
On that note, we do encourage you to come visit us at Celebrate Recovery on Mondays. And we will actually be starting lesson 1 still, because we had to have a shutdown, but that'll be starting very soon. And that's a great time to get started with us. It's on denial. And Scott will be sharing about that. And we look forward to seeing you in person or seeing you here on this channel next time for our next video. All right, guys?
Take care.